My friends, welcome to the trifecta of joy. I am joined today by Charlene Sheffelmair. Now, Charlene is amazing because not only is she my lawyer, but she has this really, really cool newsletter called the Scheffelmair. Now, Charlene is an associate lawyer with Davidson and Williams, and she's primarily a solicitor focused in the areas of corporate and commercial law, real estate, planning and development, and wills and estates. However, what she does is she puts together this really cool newsletter every month. And Charlene, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for being here, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
When you put together this newsletter, it is so beautiful. Because what you do is you weave pieces of your life and your own experiences into also helping people understand themselves. And then you talk about some bits and pieces and give advice around how to navigate different legal situations for people. So I have a question though. Why did you decide to also add that personal piece to your newsletters?
So I've been grappling for a long time with wanting to start a blog, and I couldn't really decide on the right platform. And I had always also wanted to do a little bit of, legal writing. And, we had toyed around with the idea of maybe doing, a legal blog, maybe on the DW's website or something like that. And I finally just ran across a LinkedIn newsletter one day, and I'd never seen one before, started looking into that. And I thought, that was just kind of the perfect platform. And I couldn't decide on one or the other. So I just thought, I can kind of do both and make it my own and do something different.
It's so lovely. It is so lovely. Now, the one that really, really caught me and really connected deeply with me was the one that you wrote about friendship. Now, in your own words, how would you describe what you wrote about with regard to friendship?
Just the friendship transitions. Adult friendships are really hard. And as we move into adulthood, our relationships change, and our ability to service those relationships change as our demands on our time and on our life change. And, sometimes it's really difficult to deal with that change. And I've gone through a lot of transition with many of my friendships. And so it was something that had been on my mind really recently. And so I just wanted to write about it. And, it was kind of cathartic actually to kind of get it all out on the page and process it that way. And yeah.
So let's talk about the evolution of friendship. What have you personally experienced in the evolution of adult friendship? Because I think we all notice that our adult friendships do evolve and they do change and they kind of morph, and sometimes they become closer and sometimes they fall away. What was your experience?
So I've had a couple of different experiences. So in my post, I wrote about a high school best friend that we are no longer friends, and that was a really big that was really difficult for me. And just the way that friendship ended was really difficult. One day I thought we were best friends, and the next, she was calling me to tell me that, she didn't want to be friends with me anymore. And I was completely taken aback by that. And it was really hard. And then, I have other friendships where just proximity is a major factor. My best friend from law school, she's still in Kelowna, and we went to law school together in Kamloops, and a 10-hour distance is really, really hard to maintain a super close friendship. And, you can stay in contact in a lot of ways, but proximity is, I think, a really big component of friendship.
And proximity, that is an interesting thing, right? Because proximity gives us the opportunity kind of to be in each other's faces and spaces a little bit more. Which in some ways makes the relationship feel more tangible because it's more in person. So how do you maintain a friendship over that kind of distance?
So I'm pretty active in my friendships. I really make a point to reach out, either, texting or calling, or I like to keep tabs on my friends, their successes, their just what they're doing in their lives. And so, I try to be really thoughtful about my friendships. And so when I know things are going on with them, a promotion at work or, something challenging at work, I keep tabs on that. And so I'll send them messages or, I'm a gift giver. I show love through gift giving. And so, when tough things are going on, I'll send, a little something out there or flowers or, I just try to be really thoughtful in my friendships. And with distance, sometimes that's one of the only things you really can do when you can't just show up at their house and, go for a coffee or have a visit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, so it's interesting. You talk about being a gift giver. Are you familiar with the 5 love languages?
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say your primary love language is gift giving? What are your primary love languages?
Let me just refresh myself. So physical touch is definitely my lowest love language. So gift giving, words of affirmation, and acts of service are all kind of closely knit at the top. I think acts of service is my top one. The 4th one is escaping me, but it's funny. My husband and I will take the quizzes, every year, maybe every 6 months, and just kind of check in and see if they've changed, and it allows us to be really intentional in the way we interact with one another as well.
And that's the thing, right? Like the love languages aren't exclusive to our romantic relationships for sure, right? So it's gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch. What are they? Gifts, acts of service, and quality time.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
And quality time. Yeah. So it's interesting because we recognize those things in our intimate relationships. And I think it's beautiful that you and your husband review them because Peter and I do the same thing, actually. We kind of go through and see if there are changes in the way that we are, wanting to be loved and the way we are loving, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That does extend into our friendships, right? Yeah. So the way you're describing staying connected to friends over a distance is totally aligned with your love languages. Yeah. Now, you talked about the end of a friendship, and I think that there's a lot of value in having conversations around when friendships evolve or devolve or dissipate. Mm-hmm. Because as adults, kids go through that and they struggle. As teenagers, I think we've all been through the ups and downs of friendship, turmoil. And then as adults, we still have those experiences. And, it's navigating the challenge of figuring out, is this a friendship that is so important that I want to fight for it? Or is this a friendship that I have to recognize I have to let go? Or, how am I showing up in the friendship? How does the other person show up in the friendship? When you share, and I'm sorry, when you share this experience of thinking someone was your best friend and then all of a sudden them saying kind of friends off. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How did you deal with that? What was your experience of that?
It was really, really tough. It felt like, I'd really never gone through a romantic breakup. My husband and I have been together since we were 15, but so it kind of felt like my first, really big breakup. There was a lot of emotion and a lot of tears in those, first few days, and just, you kind of go through all of asking yourself why, and, what did I miss? And, I was trying to rack my brain going, has this been in front of me this whole time and I just didn't see it? And so, there's kind of all of that, but then all of the things that remind you of them, when you've been close for a number of years, all sorts of things will remind you of them. For instance, Gerber daisies that were her favorite flower. They're also my favorite flower, but, I can't think of them now without her popping into my mind, or places that we've been, or, just memories that we had. And, she was in my wedding. And so even our wedding photos, she's in them. And so there was kind of this transition of, I was really, really bitter for a really long time, and it was hard to get over. And, when her wedding came and went, that was really difficult for me. But I think just kind of as time moved on, and I unpacked it a little bit in therapy, and you just kind of find a way to continue on and put your time and your energy into other places. But sometimes the only thing that really heals those wounds is time. And, it's probably one of the most cliche things to say, but, it just, you needed the time to just, let it ride and, get through it.
And that's really it, right? I mean, that's part of that grief process. And then you also described the experience of, needing to process it and come to that space of kind of a peace and acceptance. And yet, there are always going to be reminders of that friendship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's really about what you do with those reminders. Are you able to hold the space of honoring the beauty of the friendship that was, now that time has passed?
I'm getting there. It's my first thought isn't bitterness anymore, but I think there's still a lot of hurt and confusion. And her and I haven't spoken, in 18 months. I've seen her once, and it was at our high school reunion of all places, which was, a really awkward experience. And, we both just kind of maintained our distance, and, we were able to coexist in a space. But, as I transition in some of my other friendships, and, some of those voids are filled with other things, I think it's getting easier to look back on it and not be bitter about it, and realize that, that was a friendship for that season of my life. And, we grew apart, and, I feel she missed out on this season of my life and this version of me. And, I think that's really unfortunate that she never really got to meet and hang out with this version of me. But, that was for that season. And now we're trying to move forward and onward and upward.
The seasons. That's such an important thing to talk about, is the seasons of life, right? I mean, it sounds like you and she were friends from high school. So you're in a very different space in your life now. And you recognize that she's missing out on this version of you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's one of those really difficult things. Someone had asked me, if she came to you today and said, I'd like to renew the friendship, what would you do? And that was a really hard question for me, because, at different stages, in the last 18 months, I think my answer would have been different. And, I don't know necessarily what I would do. I feel like there's a lot of water under the bridge now. And, I think there would have to be, a pretty big conversation about, what went on, and, how much that hurt me. And, I'm not going to say it's never possible, but, at the same time, I've kind of recognized that I'm in that new season of my life. And, if she was able to just end a friendship like that with, no explanation, and really what felt like no care for my feelings, I don't know that that's necessarily a friend I want to welcome into the new season of my life either. So I'm not going to say never, but I don't know what I would honestly say if she approached me now.
As we're talking about the evolution of friendships and letting go and recognizing the season of your life, what values do you find yourself aligning with when you think about your friendships moving forward?
Probably one of the biggest ones I have always identified with is, loyalty. I've always been one of those people that, once we've kind of solidified a friendship, we're friends. I'm there for you, and I hope that you're there for me when I need you. And, I really focus on quality over quantity. So that's a big one for me. And, I think having this mutual respect for one another, with, who you are as people. I think part of the problem that I had in that friendship that dissolved is, I just finally came to the conclusion that I had unrealistic expectations for the person that she was. I was trying to put a square peg into a round hole, and I don't know that we ever really meshed as well as I thought that we did. And so I think you need to have just respect for the people that your friends are, and not try to change them into someone that, better suits you. I think there's always room for personal growth, but there's growth, and then there's, just having expectations that people are going to be someone that they're not.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when we go into intimate partner relationships, we kind of have a set of expectations that we have. And sometimes we message those with our partner because we want them to know, like, this is who I am, and this is how I want to show up for you. And this is how our relationship can evolve together. And we don't do that in friendships. And yet we have people who, in my book, I talk about my high council, and the high council of my heart is really about, this core group of people that basically I know that if I got a phone call from them at 10 or at 2:00 in the morning, and they said, I need $10,000 and bring a shovel, I would have some questions, but there's an unquestionable, I would be there because that's the intensity and depth of that friendship. Right.
Yeah.
And yet I don't think we have ever discussed our expectations in our friendship. So, it's kind of navigating what are your expectations and what are their expectations. And, you said, like, you probably had expectations that she couldn't meet. And so, I think we all kind of have to navigate that. Do you have really intentional conversations in your friendships about what they mean to you?
I don't, and I should. This probably sounds funny coming from a lawyer, but I'm really conflict adverse, and I have a really hard time having those difficult conversations in my friendships. I don't have any problem having them, in my marriage. We are very open communicators, but I think I have such a fear of losing the friendship that I'm the accommodator. I have a really hard time with that. And I know I need to have more of those conversations, but it's historically been really difficult for me to do that.
Well, and Charlene, I really think though that you're not alone in that. I think a lot of us have that exact challenge, right? Like, how do we communicate to these people that we love so dearly? When there is conflict, when there is challenge, when there is difficulty, or when you just really want someone to know how much they mean to you, right? Like, that's the other piece of it. I think sometimes we do, I know I do, take some of my friendships for granted because they're there. And those friendships are work. They take effort, they take intention. And it really is important to be able to determine where you're leaning in, and also see how that other person is leaning in as well, right? Yeah. But being conflict adverse, that is hilarious that you're conflict adverse as a lawyer. And I mean, in reality, there's a very different kind of conflict when our heart is involved than when we're talking about legalities, right?
Absolutely.
And so when your heart is involved, it is such an emotional adventure, if you will, as you move through the different phases of life, seasons of life, and of friendship. It's kind of an unavoidable, beautiful part of life. How would you describe your closest friendship right now?
It's a newer friendship in my life, and it was one of those friendships where we clicked instantly. It was really quite neat. I vividly remember one of our first dinner outings, and we had a fairly big heart-to-heart actually about friendships and how both of us historically had been let down by friends in our past, and both felt like we always went the extra mile in our friendships, and had the expectation that our friends would do the same thing for us, and always kind of ran into these situations where our expectations weren't met, and so her and I think have similar love languages and similar expectations in the friendship. And we're also in similar seasons in our lives. Neither of us have kids. We're both quite career driven. And so, it's been a friendship that I've really come to appreciate and enjoy. And so it's been really great to meet someone like that, at this stage of adulthood, because it's really difficult, I think, to make new close friends when, in your 30s or even, later than that.
And that's actually a really important thing to point out too, is, we really do get a core foundation of our friendships in our, young adult years. And then as we move further into adulthood, we kind of do seem to solidify our friendships, and maybe it is harder. Is it harder to bring new friendships into our lives as we get older? Do you think?
I think so. And I think sometimes it's harder to transition. I have a hard time. I have a lot of, acquaintance / new friendships in a lot of different environments. So, I have people that I, am really friendly with at work and I enjoy seeing at work. I have people that I'm really friendly with, on boards that I'm on. I have people that I'm really friendly with, on my volleyball team. But I have always struggled with transitioning those friendships to closer friendships, probably because of my social anxiety, and always worried that, that person may not want to transition that friendship out of that space. But I think as I've come to realize, a lot of people struggle to do that. And, my husband always says to me, what's the worst they're going to say? No. Like, if they say no, it's not a big deal. You can just continue on. And so I think it's difficult to move those friendships into those closer places.
And when you add something like social anxiety, and I think that fear of rejection is kind of a human condition, right? Like I think we all go through that experience of fearing being rejected or judged, or reaching out and not being met with that reciprocal interest or desire. But I love that your husband is like, really though, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? They could say no. The other piece of it is what is the best thing that could happen? Yep. Right? It may not be a long enduring friendship, but it might be being able to share some cool experiences together, deepening a connection in a different way. You never know what happens when you take a chance and reach out to someone, but it does take courage to be able to put yourself out there and try and make those connections. And the reality is that, like, what you described is like, we have all these circles of association, right? Right? Like, where we kind of know of people or get to know people on a relatively surface level. Like, for example, perhaps with volleyball, like you know little bits and pieces, but you don't get to know each other intimately unless you make that really intentional decision to reach out and connect. And I have to ask this. When you find, like, you're talking about this new friendship that you have and how you guys have connected and talked about your own experiences in friendship and are being in similar places of your lives, which is so important. And I think that is a part of a connection too. But you also, like, do you intuitively feel a friendship? Like, do you follow your intuition when you're like, I need to know this person better, or this person, there's something about this person? Do you follow that intuition?
I think so. I have a pretty good read. I think when I sit down with someone, to have coffee or trying to kind of explore a relationship with that person, I think I get a pretty good gut feeling, within the first, couple of minutes, even sometimes. But yeah, it's sometimes you get a really strong feeling like that, like I did with this new friend. Like within our first coffee, it was like, I think we're gonna click, and I want to have more coffees with this person and see where it goes. And And likewise, with some people, right away in the first couple of minutes, this person and I don't click, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. 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 Being able to pay attention to what your gut is saying about whether or not this is worthy of pursuing because it aligns with your values and your feelings of connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So important. So important. Charlene, this has been such an amazing conversation around kind of the evolution of friendship. And the reason, it was so important to me to have you talk about it was because you talked about that experience of losing a friendship and moving forward so beautifully. You're very vulnerable in the truth that, yeah, it hurt like hell. And yeah, it kind of rattles where you are and how you see yourself in your life when something that has been a part of you for so long falls away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, we experience that in a lot of different parts of our lives. And I think that a lot of people don't give a lot of space to thinking about the value of their friendships and what they offer to their lives and how they're showing up. So that's why I just saw this as such a beautiful opportunity to talk with you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, moving forward, if you had a piece of advice for someone around how to be clear in your own friendships, what would you suggest to someone?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I would start honestly with figuring out what your love language is, because and apply that to your friendships and think about, what expectations you might have had, or, the ways in which you want to be appreciated in your friendships. And then, I would say take stock of, the friends you have around you then. And, if there are some friendships where you've been having a mismatch in expectations, I think just approach that friend and sit down. Maybe it's a text message conversation to start. While that's not always ideal, it's sometimes an easy olive branch to extend to kind of take the temperature of the situation, for maybe a larger conversation later over, coffee or dinner. But I think, if you're thinking about having those conversations, the worst thing that's going to happen, the absolute worst is you're going to lose that friendship. But as we were saying, the best thing that, could happen is that friendship could really blossom into something a lot more fulfilling for you. And, when you look at the cost benefit, I think, that benefit, I would probably outweigh that cost, and really what the likelihood is that you would lose that friendship over that kind of a conversation.
Well, and I think that's really important too. In some of my friendships, I've had many hard conversations, and some of those conversations have led to a falling away, kind of just a gentle letting go. And that's been that's also a hard thing, is just letting go and realizing that friendship has maybe just run its season. And then in other situations, I've had very, very hard conversations with friends, and really it's been a heart-bearing, exposing, really raw space to be in, and kind of a together decision making around, is this a friendship I want to fight for, I want to invest in, I love so deeply that I need that I want to hold on to it, and I want us to work through it, or where are we each in that journey, right? Like it really is about that communication piece, but more than anything, like you said, it's that awareness first and foremost. Like, who are you in this friendship? What are your expectations? And then being able to notice how the other person shows up too, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so beautiful. So beautiful. Charlene, thank you so much for being here and sharing with our Trifecta of Joy audience as we talked about friendship. I am so grateful for you, and I will make sure that everyone has a link to your fabulous newsletter. It is absolutely awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I was really honored that you asked and really enjoyed being here.
Thank you. To our listeners, thanks so much for joining us again with the Trifecta of Joy. Your friendships really do matter. I know that you care about the people in your lives, and those special people that are our friends are there for a reason. Take stock, like Charlene said, figure out what matters, and then lean in. Your life is worth the journey, my friends. I love you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for being here. Mwah!